Okay, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. We're joined by hundreds of people for the next 2 days, and it makes me very, very excited and happy to have you all here. So thank you again, I appreciate it. If we've never met before, I'm Naama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density, and we put together this 2-day seminar that feels like a marathon. It's like overwhelming amount of content that we're gonna hear directly from the experts in the next 2 days, 6 hours over 2 days. So I would like to go over the agenda just to kind of give everyone a brief on what we're going to learn. Let's see. Here I have it handy. So let's zoom in a little bit. So again, 2 days, I'm going to start with the planning overview and kind of building the foundation. Right after me, we're going to have Donny Afonso from Pelican Woodcliff, who is going to talk about testing feasibility. He's a cost consultant, and I felt like these two fundamental aspects will build the knowledge for the rest of the seminar. At 10 a.m., we're joined by Adam Scheffer, who's going to talk about the risk of small. He's a developer and the challenge of financing small. And we hear a lot from developer, there's not enough critical mass and these small projects can't work and it doesn't make sense and it's a waste of time. Adam will speak to that. Then at 10:30, both today and tomorrow, we have networking sessions. These are exclusive, separate sessions that you had to register in advance. But the two sessions, so today we'll get to know each other in kind of a larger group, and tomorrow we'll have more of a speed dating. So it's going to be different. Today and tomorrow it's going to be different people, because we have lots of people, so we're going to break it up to different rooms. Right at 11, we're going to talk about raising capital. And I think that topic, especially for younger or startups, it's a question that they believe that it's what's standing between them and building an infill development. So I think that would be a very crucial, and I think Human has a very interesting approach that he himself implemented in his own company. And lastly, we're going to speak with Sarah Hudo, who is a community engagement expert. And I know there are lots of community members who are registered to this to this seminar today. And I really hope that this seminar will also be the opportunity to rethink, especially from community members that care deeply for their neighborhood and what does it mean? So Sarah will be this in-between explaining how we should engage the community. Tomorrow, we're going to start the day with Lirad Klingman. And if you watched any of my previous webinars, you know Lirad. He's a close friend and one of the co-hosts of the webinar series. He's going to talk about marketing and sales and branding and positioning a small development project, in what ways it is different from selling a condo in a mid-rise or a tall building. Then we'll have a very interesting design, Pachacucha style, 5 architects, 5 minutes each, will present a small scale multi-unit project. I'm really excited about this session. That's why I also allowed it for an hour. And again, a networking session. Then we'll come back for talking about rental. So that's another thing I hear a lot. Rental doesn't work. The numbers don't work. It has to be condo. So Leonid Kotov will cover that. What's the difference? Why small could work actually with rental? And we will end the seminar with a case study from vision to execution. How does it look like? So I thought that would be a good session to finish with. So you see, it is a lot of content. I was just making myself coffee because I realized I won't have any other chance to get myself coffee today. So at least before noon. So hopefully you are excited. And the reason I chose these topics, and I also had to not include some other topics such as sustainability or affordability, because I wanted to build on top of the foundation, the design and planning that I get to deal with in my everyday. I wanted to bring other aspects, more financial and business oriented. And this entire seminar, by the way, is built on another webinar that we had a year ago. We hosted 5 municipal planners from 5 cities across the US and Canada. So it was Toronto, Vancouver, Portland, Minneapolis, and Seattle. Actually, I should put a link in the chat box so you could watch this webinar later. And it was a very successful webinar. Actually, I had even the planners thanking me for bringing them around the table. And we heard the missing middle, the different approaches to missing middle from these 5 cities and directly from the municipal planners. So it was very, very cool. And we had Alex Bazakovic from the Golden Nail hosting the webinar. So and it's been a year. And in this past year, the city of Toronto has done a lot of work in reviewing and revisiting the policy of how we can take the definition of stable neighborhoods that I'm going to talk about in a moment and really see how we can increase the types of housing that we have in these neighborhoods without changing them dramatically. And the policy ranges from small laneway suites or garden suites, multiplexes such as triplexes or fourplexes, to low-rise apartment buildings up to 4 stories. And in this seminar today, and I want to make this point, especially if I have planners in the audience, the seminar today, I actually didn't want to bound it to the yellow belt or the missing middle or the city's definition to what is the missing middle in the yellow belt. I wanted to talk about infill opportunities. I wanted to talk about building in small scale. So if you see in the next few days that we are also referring to projects on Main Street or mixed use areas, it's not because we are not familiar with the definition. Trust me, that's not the case. It's because we wanted to broaden up the context, because in my personal opinion, it will be really hard to solve the affordability crisis with garden suites and laneway suites. We need to open it up to other opportunities. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the planning context. Let me share with you. Oh, sorry, I want to share the screen. So this is part of a video. I don't know why it's a little bit blurry, sorry about that, but it's part of a video of a planning, we call it planning for non-planners, that we are working on and producing. And I wanted to show you there's a really cool effect. So yeah, exactly that. So what you saw here is the land use map of the city of Toronto. That is probably the most important map of the official plan, or the one that, at least as a planner or speaking about development potential, it tells us the most. And you can see we kind of abstracted the yellow from the entire map. And these yellows, again, I'm really covering the basic here, but these yellows are the neighborhoods and counted for residential uses, and they need to remain stable, or they need to be protected, which I have a lot of problems with this definition of protecting the neighborhoods, but that's for another day. And some would say, you know, that the yellow in the land use map plus the light green counts for 3/4 of the city. And some would say that the properties that are zoned residential count for 1/3. I mean, both of these are facts, but however you want to look at it, it does count for the vast majority of the city's land. So when we are talking about the affordability crisis and the housing crisis, it starts with that the creating the scarcity of land, that all we can build is on the mixed use areas and the apartment neighborhoods, that these are the places for intensification. So the yellow belt, as I mentioned here, so the neighborhoods, and the yellow belt is a pun, it's a joke, showing how restrictive this land use designation is. And basically, for decades, all you can build here, in most cases, is demolish a house and just build a bigger house. So now the city is really trying to revisit that and see how we can introduce other housing typologies to the neighborhoods. So let me see what else I wanted to say. On our website, you can find lots of materials and that cover the missing middle. And I think I'm pretty much covered. Maybe we can do a little bit, leave some time for Q&A. I guess I spoke very, very fast. Let me see. Sorry. And if anyone has any questions, now would be a good time to post them. And I will check that I covered everything that I wanted to talk about. I'm asked if the webinar, which I'm recording it, if it will be circulated. It will be uploaded to YouTube once it's done. Let me see. Okay. So I was asked about inclusionary zoning, and I think I don't know if all of you could see the questions, but let's talk about inclusionary zoning. So inclusionary zoning, I think, especially in the context of missing middle, I think it's very interesting to bring it up because right now inclusionary zoning, and let me just talk about the facts, we're talking about certain major transit areas that the city identified 16 of them for now, that any development of 100 units or more would have to provide 5 to 10% affordable units. And the 5 to 10% will range in the specific location. And it means that practically without giving away any of the other requirements, not angular planes, not development charges, it means that basically the 90% of the market rate units will compensate or pay for the 10% affordable. So just again, to put it in context, in the context of this webinar, we're not talking necessarily about these specific areas, because anything that will be in proximity to transit will be higher density than the scale we are talking about today. But the reason I do want to answer this question is because you saw how much attention the inclusionary zoning got in the past few months. And I don't know if you experienced it, but someone who lives and breathes the real estate industry, it got a lot of attention. And it's really interesting, especially in the context of today's seminar, to think about how much of the land use designation in our city, the zoning, is not inclusionary zoning. And especially that's why I started with the yellow map showing with the yellow belt or neighborhoods, I should stick to professional terms, showing that the exclusionary zoning, right? Because in the vast majority of the city, you can't build multi-unit housing. And right now, not only that we are limited in where we can build, but with the inclusionary zoning policy to stick to those stations and say that they need to provide 10% affordable housing, while the rest of the city, the vast majority of the city, you can't increase and provide more housing typologies or more housing options. I hope you can see the irony here. So if you have more questions about inclusionary zoning, I would love to answer. They're asking for the link for the previous webinar. Here, I'll share it again. Okay, I see another question. Again, the other question I see is about affordability and the missing middle. Why do I think that we're going to have that missing middle could be affordable? So that's a very, very good question. And eventually, there are some keys in the city that needs to be resolved. For example, the municipal approval process. So let's talk about that for a moment. Right now, if you want to increase or add density to a certain property, especially under the missing middle, we are trying to get our projects at least through the committee of adjustment. So just to make it very clear, with any project, let's say you have as of right, which is not something that I got to experience because nothing can be built as of right. You have committee of adjustment and you have a rezoning application route. Now, right now, the developers are looking at a process, just the approval process of approximately 1 to 2 years, and I should say 18 months to 2 years, which is a very long time when your project doesn't have a lot of units. So one of the things the city is now considering, for example, is to upzone the main streets of the neighborhood. So think of streets like Dufferin, Lansdowne, Christie. These streets have, by the way, the same right of way. They are the same width as Bloor and College, so they're pretty wide. There is no commercial component on these streets, and these streets should accommodate forced, or that should be permitted as of right. That's why the city is considering to upzone these properties or these main streets. So when we talk about affordability, it's linked directly to the approval process, because if the developer needs to carry a property and pay property tax and maybe the property is not in good condition to be rented in the meantime, it means there are carrying costs associated with that money, with that time that they are waiting, not to mention consulting fees or development charges at the end. So that is one aspect of affordability, the how long it takes to be approved. The other thing is that small projects could be constructed in wood or timber, depending on the height of the building. Generally speaking, the Ontario Building Code allows buildings up to 6 stories to be constructed in timber. So I know that during COVID, lumber cost went up 50%, but in normal days, wood or timber have their own advantages. That could be translated to cost down the road. So that is another thing. And the third part of affordability that I would like to link to small scale is that the supply of land. And right now, when you're talking about where the city will direct growth or would anticipate growth, it would be in the mixed use areas, so pink in the land use map, or orange apartment neighborhoods, which is like the rental buildings. And what is interesting to understand is that the yellow belt that counts for the majority of the city will have much more opportunities, and with supply and demand, hopefully cost of land will be less hectic than mixed use land. Okay, I got another very, very good question. What is considered affordable housing? Which is a fantastic question. And let me tell you, every municipality I work with and every sub-project within the municipality has a different definition of affordability. Basically, affordability is compared to market rate. So it could be 80% of the market rate, 90% of the market rate, 40% of the market rate, and then you're reaching deeper levels of affordability. So if you're familiar, again, we're a little bit, just because your questions are really good. For example, when we talk about the project, some of the projects like Open Door or Housing Now that the City of Toronto is leading, they define deeply affordable and affordable. So it could be 80% of the market rate as affordable and 40% or less, 20% as deeply affordable. So when I just covered the affordability and the missing middle, I was talking about general affordability by increasing supply and in the market, which I know some of you would say increasing supply doesn't mean we'll get more affordable units, which is right and wrong, but we don't have time for this discussion right now. Okay, what about development fees? Should the city offer lower rate for missing middle? We have a client paying $200K in development fees for a fourplex. So let's just cover development. What are development charges? Development charges are fees the developer needs to pay when I believe it's just in the permit stage, so not in the rezoning stage. And it's usually, it goes by a rate for a 1-bedroom and studio and 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. So there are like 2 different rates. Again, I don't get to deal with writing these checks, so I'm not that familiar with the amounts, but I do know that the amounts are starting at 45K per unit. So let's say you're building a 4-plex, you need to pay 200K as our colleague here is mentioning. I know development charges is kind of a topic that really easily get picked because you can calculate it very easily. But the truth is, if we can make other things such as of right, things that I just talked about, the municipal approval easier, that it won't take you 2 to 3 years to get something approved. And I mentioned the 2 years, that is assuming the community is kind of on board with your project, because we know that it could make it much longer. So calculating the fees, the consulting fees, the property tax, the rent in 2 years at least, comparing to development charges, we are looking at something equivalent, if not worse, in cost, in expenses. So development charges, I know it's something that could be really easily picked as a topic that where the city needs to give incentives, but I think there are so many other aspects that the city could look into, that development charges probably shouldn't be the first one. Maybe because development charges are charged for a reason, for services, for better infrastructure, for schools, for parks, perhaps for the affordable units they are. What we saw in the inclusionary zoning, I think we are for sure missing some of the things, because using the same tools and limiting the height and density, using 45 degrees angle of plane, but saying within that box, within that limited box, you have 10%, you need to provide 10% affordable housing and make the 90% compensate for that. That I think is a bad mechanism. Wait. Sorry, I get a lot of questions here. Let me see. Wait, let me see. Everything is fine. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Okay, is the video you just shared, Planning for Non-Planners, available? It will be available on our shop. It's not available yet. Everything is recorded and it will be available. It's a really cool program. We took all the official plan maps that we review and the design guidelines, the mid-rise tall buildings and growing up, and we recorded and produced kind of in a small chunk, digestible, bite-sized videos to learn. So we called it Planning for Non-Planners, and it will be available. You can send me an email and I will let you know. Could you also share the link for the city planning conference mentioned before? It's in the chat. You can find it. I saved it twice. Okay, I'm asked about, I don't know if you can see the Q&A, but sorry, I jumped late, but if you haven't already mentioned, what is your take on how extensive the EON, so EON stands for Expanding Housing Options in Our Neighborhoods project, which is the name of the committee that the city has, that I am a subject expert matter to that committee. Allowing multiplex in our zone. So for that, Jason, thank you for that question. The city actually right now, like 3 weeks ago, issued a survey that they are interested in getting your inputs. So we need to make our voice heard and make sure that it's not just NIMBYs who are going to fill this survey telling the city it's a bad idea. Now it's the opportunity to affect and influence the decision. So I can ask Igor, can you, if you can find the link to that survey. By the way, guys, I wanted to thank Igor from our team, who is here with me and in charge of all the things technical. So thank you, Igor, for being here. Okay, is it possible to reduce planning expenses and time for small owner and builders? So I agree with you. It should be shorter. It should be done through committee of adjustment. And I can tell you that some of our projects, we had to but we had to be to a very strong opinion why it should go through committee of adjustment, because the planning department thought it should go through a rezoning application. Now, in case you wonder what's the difference between committee of adjustment and rezoning means that you're bounded to section 37, so community benefits. It means that you need to have parkland dedication, even in just cash in lieu. It means that the decision will go through council with an open house, which is a whole other different approval process than committee of adjustment. Okay, I covered all the questions here. Let's see. Okay, the tech support, some of us cannot see the links. Okay. Okay, thank you for letting us know. Okay, let's see if you have any other questions that I missed. I learned that the affordable units will have their cost factors into the land pro forma, which can bring the land value down and make it okay for developers. Maybe a good point for developers. I read that too. That was in the city's report. In the situation that Toronto is in, and I know, like, we're looking at the affordability crisis right now in 2021. Just imagine what it's gonna be like in 20 years from now, in 30 years from now. I am skeptical that that inclusionary zoning will bring cost of land down. I just don't see the rationale behind it. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, it's not my expertise, but I did see that on the city's report. Yes, that is true, Dawn. Thank you very much. That some definition of affordable housing or affordability are based on median income and not just market rates. That is true. And then the median income is, although Dawn, and thank you for that. It is more common to refer to market rates than median income, and I can also see the advantages because sometimes market rates are regardless of, it's just a market necessity comparing to the median income. And with that, so I was wondering how that's going to work, and hopefully we'll have the smooth transition with all of our speakers. And we're joined by Donna Sono. Thank you so much, Donnie, for joining us. Donnie is a principal at Pelican Woodcliff. And I thought he would be the perfect person to speak right after planning about the cost planning, understanding cost, the most important, because even, when we work with developers, they first come to a planner or planning. Cost is the very next step. So Donnie, thank you very much for joining us. Please introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself. We have our next speaker will show up at 10 a.m., but it's all yours till then. And we'll have some Q&A, guys, at the end. So make sure that any question you have for Donnie, you put it in the chat or the Q&A, and I will help Donnie facilitate that.